On this week's episode of Be More Super, we've got a great guest. It's our second director on the show, so I'm very honoured. So if you haven't been under a rock, you would notice that just recently, in the last 2 days, we've had a wonderful movie released on DVD and Blu-ray. It's, of course, Skylines, and we've got the director, writer and producer with us, Liam O'Donnell. Liam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brian. Excited to be here.
So you are the second director I've ever had. The first being Colin Chilvers, the Oscar-winning director of Moonwalker and Smooth Criminal, and he's worked on Superman. He's a special effects director as well. So he's absolutely wonderful. But I'm very honoured to have you on the show because I've been a fan of your work since 2010. And I've got to say, your final installment, well, hopefully it's not final installment, but, you know, who knows? We can talk about that. You've got, obviously, Skylines, the third installment of the Skyline franchise. So before we start talking about Skyline, how has the pandemic affected you as a director in actually getting work done?
Well, well, thank you for all that, first of all. And we were really fortunate timing wise. I mean, we shot this in the summer of 2019. We edited it all fall, and we kind of had our first screening in Soho right around Christmas 2019. And then we edited a little bit more, and then we went back to Soho. We had to lock the cut. And so, yeah, we did right at the end of February. I got a plane back to LA, and everything shut down right after that. So fortunately, that was when we were going to be doing a lot of visual effects remotely. You know, the plan was for me to fly back and forth a few more times, but we were able to kind of do everything on Zoom or CineSync, and Frame.io is a really valuable tool, which is kind of like a big cloud-based server that you can make notes on every single frame of every single shot, and everybody could see it. You can tag anyone that needs to be, informed on it. So that was actually, I'd use that for every movie going forward anyway. But that was a really great tool to have on this one that I didn't before. And so I think from the movie we got pretty lucky, but there's still some things that even with incredibly unsatisfying, I find myself still just feeling like, did this movie even come out? You just not being able to see it with an audience and go to the film festivals. We premiered at Fright Fest, which was all digital. And then, we did a bunch of other great festivals around the world, but for Beyond, I tried to go to as many of them as I could afford to go to. And it was such a rewarding experience, and I met a lot of people, and that's kind of what you're in the game to do. You're kind of continuing trying to build relationships to make more movies in the future. So it feels like a very small complaint, all things considered, but it definitely was a different experience this time for sure.
Awesome. So let's get to know you a bit more, Liam. Let's before we get to the meat and the bones of everything. When growing up, I'm not sure how old you are, but when growing up, what were the films that really blew your socks off, that really, really wowed you?
Well, I'm 38, so I'll be 39 in a few months. But the first R-rated Predator, and I actually kind of manipulated this situation with I knew a friend who had it, and his parents let him watch R-rated movies, and so I just begged to sleep over at this kid's house, and then he was like, fine, we'll watch Predator. And so that really kind of blew me away, and it was the one that I kept going back to and returning to over my life. And then lucky enough, the first movie that I got to work on was Alien versus Predator 2 back in 2006. So it's kind of had this weird thread throughout my life. but then, you know, similar in vibes would be, you know, the Aliens, Alien franchise, Aliens particular. The first one of those I got to see in the theater was Resurrection. I'm trying, and really, I think, you know, the one that I remember just kind of like blowing the doors open with my parents no longer trying to stop me from seeing R-rated movies was Terminator 2. It was like they couldn't hold it back anymore after that. You know, I got my neighbor to rent it for me because I was only 10 at the time. And then I got him to do the copy on the VHS to VHS recording
Oh, them good
before
old days.
before I brought the recording back. So I had like a VHS duplicate of T2 that I watched all the time. And that was also, I think, the big gateway into like visual effects and you know, thinking about these things, you know, just kind of getting obsessed about how they're done. So yeah, those are kind of like the trinity for me as a young kid, for sure.
Do you know what? I can remember those days of getting the 2 VHS players, and I copied a copy of Critters back in the day. And obviously, you know, the problem is now is that we've got too many torrents and too many sites that you can illegally, you know, watch things, which I've always been against, because, you know, you've got to support the arts, you've got to support, you know, production, you know, a film, and you've got to buy it. And my wife gets sick and tired of me buying Blu-rays and DVDs and 4Ks every time there's a different edition of that movie. But you do it because you support that franchise, and you put money back into the industry. So
Absolutely.
what kind of director are you? So if I went on one of your sets and I took one of the actors aside, you know, how would they describe you as a director on how you approach, you know, a set?
Well, from their interviews, I thought like the number one thing they seemed to all say was that really open and collaborative, and I think that was something I kind of learned early on, was not to say no and like shut things down, which I think is kind of your first instinct. You're like, no, this is how we're doing it, and it really kind of you just have to think about it from the other person's point of view. It's like, you've hired me to be this character. So I kind of, you know, we don't get a lot of time to do rehearsals and prep and in these kind of indie low budget movies that the schedule is constantly the enemy. So I really like to give everybody like the first couple takes and let them kind of feel it out. And then I get in there and kind of try to steer things to where I want them. But it also helps you get surprised and inspired in the moment. Yeah, that was kind of, I'd say that was a learning process on the second one. And then in the third, it was such a good feeling, really, you know, from around the first week on, to just kind of being like, kind of feel like you know what you're doing. Because, like seeing problems and then in real time fixing them. And sometimes it's just the camera. The camera is hurting your performance right here because we're not moving at the right spot, and this is stacking here and that's stacking there. So I learned a lot of blocking stuff from my DP on Beyond Skyline, Christopher Probst. And then in this one, my DP was Alain Duplantier, the French DP, and he was very much kind of hands off on the blocking. So it was interesting. Like he would kind of let me get in there and do all the blocking, and so it was sort of a good thing, because like having a DP who was really good at camera blocking on the first time, and then kind of having to do more of it myself, exercising those different muscles. I think it just made me better, made me thinking more about things like in 3D in the frame. And so, yeah, it's kind of, you know, all those different, every time you make a movie, it's like going to film school, and you're kind of My goal every time is to hire much smarter, talented people than me, and so that I can, hopefully continue to get better.
Yeah, and I've always heard that the art of being a good director is surrounding yourself with amazing people.
Yes.
I mean, what's your view, just very quickly, on the whole Zack Snyder and the Whedon thing? With the Justice League, or wouldn't you want to say? Because I've got to say, from a director's point of view, obviously Whedon came in for the Justice League and did his own version. And Zach's come back now with the help of HBO Max and $70 million, just a few dollars, to put it into his own vision. I mean, what's your view on how directors should treat people on set? Because obviously there are
Oh,
speculation of how he's been treating people. Nothing's yet
yes.
been confirmed. But what's
Right.
your view on how you should be treating your
I
your
love
talent?
I love the way things are changing. I really, when I came up, it was a much more militaristic, abusive, like kind of vibe in general. And that was sort of came from the generation before the generation ahead of me.
Hmm.
And James Cameron's been pretty honest about this, about how he evolved, over his career. But a lot of people like looked up to that style, and I never liked it. And I had to suffer, take my licks. I suppose one of the first days I was ever on set, I was just a writer on this job, and I was told to go look through the camera lens. And then the person said, "Do you see any words in there?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Get the fuck out of here." And I was like,
Wow!
"Oh,
Wow!
cool,
Wow!
awesome." And it was, it was a joke, but it wasn't. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
just like, yeah, okay, cool. So I kind of noticed that. To me, I felt like a lot of that sea change was kind of happening over the past 10 years in a great way. And so, yeah, no, I'm not really a tantrum thrower, in general, but I just generally hate asshole and abusive behavior. And I'm so happy that it's kind of, on its way out. Um,
Good. Yeah.
but yeah, this part three was like a really, really fun group of people, and we kept the mood quite light, even though it could be really intense and very emotional. You always have to kind of respect the fact that the actors have to go into this agitated space for a lot of an action movie. So some of
Mm.
that is part and parcel. You're always going to have a little bit of your kind of bringing people in and out of two realities throughout a day, which is like, for us, either behind the camera on the crew, we're just ourselves all day, but they have to go
Yeah.
from like, my life is in danger to let's get lunch. So
Mm.
there's always that type of stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, I without like speaking on anything that I don't know anything about,
Yeah.
I am very quite encouraged by the Snyder thing, and just as a parent, that whole story is incredibly heartbreaking. And I'm
Definitely.
also really just like amazed at how many children he has, because I just had my fourth, and it's generally people just look at me like I'm absolutely insane. So when I was reading about how big and kind of cool his family life was, it made me feel like, oh, maybe I'm not so out there after all. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, the only downside for me is that Skylines is, I think, coming to the Netflix the exact same day as Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I don't think we'll be like we'll be
Oh
making much of a
no!
dent in the social media sphere that weekend. But it's a long game.
Wow.
The nice thing about being on those streamers, like Beyond's been on there since 2018, and it's like you just see people discovering it every single day.
Yeah.
That's what's so great about being on Netflix.
So let's look at how this all started. So back in 2010, you co-wrote Skyline, Skyline, for me, I thought was an awesome movie. And after reading up about it and like the budget and everything like that, it just blew me away. Some might see it as a survival guide to an alien invasion, um, because it's one of those films that you're like shouting at the screen because you know that some of the characters are doing the wrong things, and I just think it's fantastic. But the most interesting fact about that film is that how quick it went from you writing it, co-writing it, to coming to our screens. If you can explain just very briefly on how that happened for you on it being on our screens.
Yeah, the speed was crazy. We kind of came up with this idea, I want to say in October of 2009, and it was such a simple idea because the co-director Greg Strauss had just bought this condo, and so you go up from the condo and you look out on the city and you see this view and you're like, okay, well, Paranormal Activity had just come out. I think Cloverfield was the year before. So we're like, let's do like an end of the world movie, but we're going to film it in your apartment. But not with that sort of, found footage shaky cam. We'll do it cinematically. But, some of the hardest thing is sometimes getting a location, getting a stage, getting something like that. And there was just interesting things to look at kind of all around this building. And so that kind of all came quick, and we were able to shoot a teaser for it, like I think around Thanksgiving 2009. And the teaser came out really, really cool. It was much more mysterious. Like you didn't see ships or anything. You just kind of saw people looking out the window, Close Encounters sort of style, lights, veins, and then poof, they disappear. So that kind of hooked some people, and we got some financing. And because we could shoot it, the actual shooting budget was so low because we got a great deal on this building. It was like, just go ahead and make it. The risk was so low that it didn't kind of make sense to like need to ask anyone else any more permission. So we went ahead and we shot it, I think January, February. I think we finished in March. It was a 40-day shoot in those apartments. And, because you have hydraulics, they did a bunch of previs and post-viz. And so we screened like the last 10 minutes for Relativity in April. And they were like, great, we love it. They bought it. They started building this whole Comic-Con campaign. Ended up, co-distributing it with Universal. And we're all like, okay, great. But then they said, like, we have some bad news. Like the best slot for you guys is November. And we were kind of hoping it was either going to be like Christmas or even the next year. And they're like, no, can you make it? And everyone was already kind of grinded to dust. And we had, I think, 2 other movies in the studio at that point, but it was a great release date, to be in that sort of like 2012, November, mid-November kind of Thanksgiving style thing. Was like, you couldn't really turn it down. So yeah, we just kind of, they kicked in a little bit of extra money for the VFX overtime, and it ended up coming out that November.
But no, it was such a good movie, and I was quite shocked to hear that the critics obviously didn't have their coffee that morning when they saw it. So as a co-writer on your baby, as I'd call it, how did that make you feel with the critics? Because
the critics was tough, but it was, to be honest, it was more the audience that didn't like it that was concerning to me. And I felt like part of it was we didn't really test the movie and do a test screening, and then part of it was being advertised as like this, Independence Day actioner and not kind of properly positioned. It was a little bit like how I was saying how the teaser was very mysterious. It was veins and eyes and whoosh, but like, they just went full. It was supposed to kind of be like a small movie that got surprisingly big. But when you advertise it as this big movie that's then surprisingly small, it's not what people are going to feel like they signed up for. but I don't know if that possibly could have been avoided or not. It's just basically like, you know, it was a perfect sort of midnight movie that got overblown into a wide release. But at the same time, if it weren't, there's no way it would have made all this money and we'd be making a part 3 10 years later. So kind of
Exactly.
like it all kind of worked out for the best. But at the time, definitely painful. And, you know, just kind of like, this was early Twitter. But I do remember just like searching Twitter and being like, worst movie ever, worst movie ever, worst movie ever, and just kind of like sinking into a hole. It wasn't great.
But the thing is, no matter what movie is out, there's always going to be people that go out their way to complain about it or critique it. And from my point of view, you know, the effects were amazing. The storyline was amazing. You know, the end twist, you know, where, you know, he's in the creature. I just think it's just fantastic. And it obviously was that springboard for this trilogy, maybe more in the future. But in 2017, we see Beyond Skyline with good old Frank Grillo. And it's your, am I right in saying it's your directorial
debut?
That's the one. God, you can tell I've had a long day. Was that your debut as a director on that movie? And how much pressure did you feel having written that as well, and being the director and having all those hats on, and it being your first movie and going from Skyline, you know? Were you drinking coffee like all day? Were you stressing out all the time? Were you... You know, how did it go for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of pressure. But it's one of those weird things where you look back and you're like, why was I not more nervous? There's always these things that can like derail the production and completely destroy them. And I've talked to friends. I have a friend who had a movie that like the plug got pulled the day before it went. So you're always more worried about that. Like I'm worried about the movie like not existing. You know, like on part 3, it's like, you know, the bond, like if we got behind schedule, like even the smallest amount, I had the bond is going to come in and yank this movie. So I was just constantly trying to get ahead of schedule. So I guess there's like that number one pressure of like just getting it done that day and each day at a time, that you don't really have time to sit back and look at the overall, like, oh my God, what am I doing of it? Because there's so many things that like you just have to do incrementally. But yeah, I was really nervous, I'd say, especially that we were filming the fight scene between Frank Grillo and Iko Uwais. That was the first 2 days of the movie. And it was like an hour away from the hotel up in this crazy rice paddy in outside of Jogja, Indonesia. And my bus got like lost for like an hour. So it was like the first day I'm like already late to set for an hour. And then, you know, we're filming them kind of walking out and they have this standoff scene and it's 4 actors and a crying baby. It's a lot of like angles, a lot of coverage, and I'm overshooting it. I'm doing too many takes, too many angles, just very, very nervous. And then all of a sudden the rain comes down and it just rains for an hour. And it just allowed me to kind of sit there and just like let it out and breathe and be like, okay, like there's only so much of this I can control. And now we're really behind schedule. So I'm going to like, let's turn the camera around and let's start this fight. Cause we couldn't shoot that direction anymore because it looked so different. So then we just started the fight and we're just kind of like, and they had been rehearsing the fight for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So that was a lot of fun for everybody. And, you know, it's all turned to mud at that point because it just rained for an hour straight. And it was like, Frank, can you throw Iko right into this puddle here? And like and Iko, of course, launches himself. Frank throws him up and it just splashed right dead center of this big puddle, and all the water went up. And that's the take that's in the movie. And that was like okay, all right, we're back on. Like, this is going to be great. This is going to work. It was probably like, you know, the best moment of the whole movie, to be honest. Cause I just felt like we're back on track, and I kind of I can shape this, and my whole life of video games and pro wrestling and movies is all paying off right in this moment. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That is awesome. And I suppose people forget that when you film on location, you have got the weather to deal with, and you've picked, such an unstable weather system where you filmed, because obviously it will rain for an hour, sunshine, rain again. But let's talk about Skylines. And the first thing I want to talk about is, let's talk casting, because there's a lot of Brits and a lot of people from the United Kingdom in the movie. Was that on purpose, or is that because they were the best ones?
Well, of course they're the best ones, but it was definitely part of getting the movie made. We figured out, if we could make a UK co-production, then we could actually get this thing off the ground. And so what was written originally, because the films have sort of a Los Angeles through line, we changed it to post-apocalyptic London. And it's one of those things that, like, along the way, you might be like, oh, this is a compromise, but I really think it made it way better, because, we then kind of were able to just do something a little bit more unexpected, and you have all these great actors that totally fit within the world, like Alexander Siddig, James Cosmo, Rhoda Mitra, all of them kind of like grounding the movie, especially in that first act with Rose. And I was telling Lindsay that I was like, this is like such a great place for you as like a first time lead, that you are basically, getting supported by these amazing, British genre actors from, Game of Thrones and Doomsday. Like, they're putting you over in pro wrestling terms. I was like, they're really kind of like, and it's almost like I always think back, like all the smart guys that, like Tom Cruise, like he did all of his movies with like Paul Newman and Dustin Hoffman when he was starting out. Like go with these great older actors, and they're gonna bring up your game. So yeah, that was a real a luxury, and I think it definitely helps kind of give the movie a completely different feel from the other ones, and ground a lot of my sci-fi gobbledygook world building in that, especially in that first act.
And who throughout the casting process really, made you take a step back? Who in that process really impressed you that you wouldn't have thought would have?
Well, it's definitely Jonathan Howard, because Leon was a tough role. A couple of different actors that were on, and scheduling difficulties. And I had seen Jonathan in the Thor films, but he was so different because he was so much younger. And he's definitely, an older, more assured dude now. But he wasn't kind of on my radar, and I'm friendly with his agent. He's the same agent as Daniel Bernhardt. So when we had this kind of last minute change, he, really suggested Jonathan to us. And when I got on a Skype with him is when I was like, okay, I really connected. And I kind of felt like he had this sort of young Christian Bale energy. He's got the great Northern accent. And I was like, just go full on that accent. He never gets to really use it. It's always an American accent, or kind of something a little more toned down. But I liked everyone in the movie to just kind of really do their own accent. That was something that I also did on Beyond with Iko and Yayan, just to have them kind of be themselves as much as possible. So yeah, I'd say Jonathan, and he's kind of become a really close friend and collaborator. And again, being like a real good team player, very, very generous with Lindsay, because they were the co-leads. It's definitely Rose's the lead of the movie, but Leon has this really nice and important arc that kind of really does embody the theme of the film. So and they got along great as well. So that was another kind of big win for us.
Yeah, it's awesome casting, and it's really refreshing to hear you say that you wanted them to keep their accents, because the worst thing you can get is an actor and you know they're British and you think, why are they doing an American accent when they don't need to? You know, it's not pinnacle to the story.
Oh,
So it's really
especially in this,
nice
is
to.
like a post-apocalyptic, like Daniel Bernhardt's Swiss. So I was like, yeah, just
Mm,
do your Swiss accent, and certain people be like, what is that accent? I was like, well, you're going to learn new things. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Like, I'm sorry that movies have taught you that there's only two accents, but like, it's
He is so
more
scary
exposure.
in the movie. He really is. Do you know what? I would not want to pick a fight with him. He would just look
No.
at you and game over. And it's really nice because on your Instagram, there are videos of him, messing about, and he just seems like a big puppy dog.
He
But I
is,
suppose
yeah.
when the camera's rolling, he's like, a Terminator.
He does look like a Terminator. I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, he's like 6'3", and it's just insane, like all muscle, and I don't know what type of vampire juice. Incredible. And I tried to like hang with him in the gym a few times, and he's just a lot stronger than I am. And
You're like, I need to go to the toilet. I'll be back in a second.
yeah, yeah.
10 minutes later, yeah.
He's a really he's a specimen. But he was also great because he had history with our stunt team, Real Deal Stunts out of Berlin. And so they'd been working together for years. And so he was sort of like this in between the stunts and the actors. And so when we had another kind of last minute change, we had another last minute actor that couldn't make it. And one of our stunt players, Cha, ended up being cast as Z. Daniel really like looked out for him and spent time with him like every night working on his lines and his delivery. And it was a really like generous team of people that wanted everybody to succeed. So that was a nice thing to see.
That fight sequence in between them two is just amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. It was just so well shot, and you're on the edge of your seat, and it was just awesome. But because obviously you're based now, well, not you, but the film is based in space, obviously that's going to mean a lot more special effects. What challenges did that create opposed to the other films?
It's actually less than Beyond,
Right.
special effects wise, because it was a lot of the lessons from Beyond Skyline was, I never wanted to shoot as much green screen as we ended up having to do, but we couldn't make this set safe in Indonesia, and to actually fly in the rock and roll truss for all of the stunts and wire gags that we were going to ship would have been just totally, too expensive. So we ended up having to shoot it in LA on green screen, and that sort of exploded our post budget and gave us way too many VFX shots, which contributed to that movie having such a long post. There's the other thing, like just as Beyond in general was like, it was like making 3 movies in one, because it was like 3 different locations. And I kind of had to make it like 3 times in post. It was like, so coming into Skylines, it was like, all right, I had this inkling on how I wanted to do the last one, and I was proven right by the process. I'm going to do it this way, full bore. And I'm even going to go a little bit farther in building the sets and try to always at least have like 3 walled sets and keep the green screen on one side so that I can still give like an expansive CG space when I need to, I can show like this big, huge cavern, or like the inside of the matriarch's lair, or the moving wall for the end set piece, but get most of the action in frame so that we're not doing like, there's nothing worse than doing like ticky-tack visual effects where you're like, kind of like it's someone talking and there's just like this strip of green over their shoulder. And you have to do that. Like the fact that you have to spend all this money just for like a reaction shot really starts to, those are what kill your budget. And I still had more of those than I would have liked in this one, but I'm getting better and better. So yeah, I think like Beyond was like 1,700 VFX shots, and this was just under 1,200. So we did get better at it, but the biggest challenge is space in general. It's incredibly difficult, time consuming, and we kind of we knew we had to come up with our own sort of stylized look, because we're never going to be able to get that like ILM Star Wars look. So we kind of went with a little bit more of like a graphic novel-y, sort of heightened look to our space, which I ended up being really, really happy with. But even finding that, like doing our opening narration space battle, took the longest part of the whole movie, because that was a lot of R&D on what the other space scenes were going to look like. And kind of we were jumping off of what we did in Beyond Skyline, but it was a completely different new visual effects facility. Again, because we're a UK co-production. Lip Sync VFX out of Soho they were our main vendor that did all of the space, the destroyed planet, all the kind of big, huge 3D animated shots, creature shots, everything with the shadows and the tankers and the spaceships, was all them. So it was definitely for me, because Greg and Colin are such, Strauss, who did the first movie and produced the sequels, are such visual effects experts. But because I was kind of off on my own on this third one, in the UK, I kind of had to step up into that different role and be the one who's like really kind of interfacing with everybody at Lip Sync. And then we also had companies, in Germany and around the world. So yeah, it's a definite challenge, but I enjoyed it.
And where do we see the franchise going? Because, not to spoil it for anyone, but there could be more, easily. I've got my ideas. But could the franchise potentially go into a series? I mean, would you want that, or would you just want to stick with films? Would you not want to maybe go into a series?
We've talked about both. It's really kind of like, I'm definitely open to it. I like the film. I'd like to do one more film, and then we'll see, because I feel like the part 4 that I have in mind, if it were so lucky to make it, could have a part of it that you could kick off to a series.
Awesome.
But each time I'm like kind of trying to end it in the movie. So like, even if there's a part 4, it's like this part 3 was like, it was very much an ending. And then there's just these nagging ideas of what the little extra tease could be. And we shot kind of 2 versions of the ending. And it just kind of like, I always try to leave everything out there on the field, not try to just be like, here's a bit, but the real movie is going to start on the next one. So I really, as much as I can, but I found, the first cut of Beyond Skyline, we didn't do a teaser for what another one could be, as a bit of a reaction to the first movie that had this big tease and people didn't like it. I just said, well, F it. Part Beyond, we're gonna, we're just gonna have them walk off into the sunset at the end. And when we got the test screening back, everyone's like, that it's a sequel. What's part 3? And I was like, okay, so there's a balance. Obviously, we went too far on either one, so that's what ended up being the inspiration for the Lindsay Morgan bookends on Beyond Skyline, which then end up being the inspiration for part 3. So in part 3, it just felt like it was coming more from the character, where I felt like Rose had kind of completed everything that we had in this movie, where she kind of come into her own. She dealt with self, and she kind of slayed those demons, but there's this part of her that was unresolved, and so that's what the a part 4 would deal with, and it's really interesting, because the other 3 movies, like the 2 sequels I've made, they're not really sequels. Beyond Skyline's a bit of a soft reboot that is a sequel at the same time, but it's not just like, here's what we did in part 1, we're right into part 2. And then part 3, it's again not really the sequel. It's a sequel in spirit, but it goes so far ahead and it's very self-contained So
Yeah.
what I've been struggling with in part 4 is that it is kind of my first real sequel where like you just have to know who these characters are. You kind of have to have been invested in this thing. There's only so self-contained that I can make it.
Yeah.
Without you kind of understanding who these people are and how they relate to each other. But so that's been a fun challenge in its own right. But I've made headway on the script, and we'll see what happens with it.
And the great thing is, and the refreshing thing is that many sequels and franchises get worse as they go on. But with Skyline, they're getting better and better and better. Rocky comes to mind. It gets better. I think Ivan Drago, and then it goes to 5 with Tommy Gunn, which is a bit, and then yeah. So what's nice is that Skyline is obviously
I like
getting
6.
better.
I like Balboa, and then I love Creed. I think Creed is right up there with the best of them. So
yeah, I think they obviously realised. I mean, Balboa was like the closure. I think after 5, they sort of it wasn't received very well, and I think Balboa. I remember I watched it in a cinema. I was the only one in there, and I thought it was
me too.
Absolutely amazing. I really did.
I caught it like
but,
by myself at the end of its run, and I was like bawling by myself in
yeah.
the theater because you're like, this is like 30 years of my life. There's not many.
Yeah.
There's not many experiences that you can have like that where you have so much of your whole life is tied to a character.
Yeah. So talking about your films and the amazing costumes and props and everything, I've got to give a shout out to Jeremy Fitzgerald because, only because we watch these movies as fans, and we don't realize everything that goes off behind the camera, and I think that stunt people especially get underappreciated by people like the Oscars, and a lot of fans don't realize who's going through all that hard work of in the suits and everything like that. I know there's other people that wore the suits, and if I'm right, on one of your Instagrams there was a picture of you in a suit as well.
That's right.
And can I guess which scene you was in that suit?
Yes.
Was it when someone was shorter when he got a new body?
Oh no. I didn't do any suit work in Skylines. So
okay.
The shorter Trent is actually just Jeremy without the suit on. So he was just in a leotard, and that was a fully CG overlay that we did in post. But no, in Beyond Skyline, the only reason why I really did suit work was Hydraulics had its own stage and studio, and we had to be editing things and trying to condense stuff, and we'd be like, didn't really get a great shot of the alien coming through this door and looking up at them when kind of Frank and Jeremy was playing Jared at that point, are up fiddling with the ship, and then the bad guy comes back in and sees them up there in part 2. We didn't get a great shot of him, and so there was the idea that it was just going to be CG, and we're like, well, let's go film something and see if we can, even if it sucks, like it's a basis to give the artist. And so we would have like no crew, no budget. It would just be me and like 3 of the guys, and I was the right size. And also it's hard to sometimes direct people on how to do suit work when you can just do it yourself. It's easier. And so like Jeremy is better than I could ever be, but I just felt like I know exactly what I want him to do, so I'm just going to do it. And so there's little pickups like that where he like puts on the power claw and goes like this and runs up towards them. I did that. And then also I did the other side of that shot. There's a POV up, and the POV is supposed to be of Frank holding the baby. And I just got in Frank's wardrobe, and because it was a POV where we could mess his face up, and I grabbed Colin Strauss's then baby. His wife was nice enough to bring their child to the stage. And so it's me looking at me for these like 2 POV things that you'd never know. But it was just like certain things where when you're filming on green and you're kind of trying to relate things in this big space, that was harder than any of those little connective things on part 3. But it was also part of that. Doing those little pickups were part of the experience that then went into shooting part 3 more kind of like holistically and knowing need. We reshot Antonio Fargas when he got stabbed by that shepherd. We wanted to reshoot that so that he had a bit of a more badass moment before he went out, which Antonio kind of adds bitch to any line of dialogue you give him. So he was like, bring it on, bitch. And so I'm the shepherd there that had to stab him. And it was kind of a sharp claw. It's like a carbon fiber thing. It's not going to hurt him, but it's still, it's like a 70-year-old man who I love dearly. And I have to sit here and kind of, with this helmet on, swing the claw and aim for his armpit. So that was kind of a stressful day, again, with a very small, like no crew moment, but that it was a ton of fun. But I Jeremy is like, I say he's sort of like the MVP of these movies. And I think especially part 3. I remember trying to tell everybody, in production that, like, yes, we need to fly this guy. We can't just use, a local guy to play Trent. I know it ended up being some really good, talented local super performers, but they didn't kind of understand until then the first day when he got in the suit and he's in the cockpit and he's with Lindsay, and it was there. You kind of see this magic trick in real time, and everyone's like, "Oh, okay, I get it now."
And he's forever going to be known for this role in this film. Like I had Ian White on the show a while back, and he was. He was a Predator.
I met Ian White. I mean, I that was the first. He did AVP 2, and he was a really nice guy, really tall, a man. And when he came out of the trailer dressed as the Predator for the first time, I'll never forget it. I mean, it was like I saw the laser, the 3 laser dots on the ground, the Vancouver like leaves, and they traveled up my whole body up to my chest, and I looked up and there he was, and you're like, he looked like a real Predator in that movie too. I mean, that is the best part of that movie is him and that suit that they did a great job on. So but he's definitely forever the Predator to me.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had Daniel Cudmore on the show as well. He did work on that. Film.
So he was Colossus in the early
X-Men.
in the X-Men movie. He did work. He was a really good like fighting Predator. So like a lot of that end fight on the rooftop in AVP 2, he did a lot of that because he was Ian's just so big and he's got the presence, but he's Daniel is a really athletic fighter.
Yeah, and then I had Brian A. Prince, that was the Predator in The Predator. The most recent one with Thomas Jane that was been on the show. I'm a bit obsessed with the Predator because I think it's an awesome character. And but with your creatures in your films, have you kept anything from the movies? Where are they now? Are they hanging up in a small cupboard somewhere?
Give you a little thing right here.
Oh, what?
This was a very sweet thing that the Fido from Crete Effects in out of Spain did for me, because they made all these pilot skulls from part 3. And awesome. He had kind of the whole, and so this one I think is just a neat thing that I have up on my dresser. And I didn't realize they had all signed it until I opened it up, and so that made me feel really good. And I have both. I have both of the power claws in my attic, which I have to get a proper display for them set up.
What?
But I kept the first one in as well, and I ended up just bringing it to Lithuania when we were filming it because it wasn't in the movie. and it was just kind of like, because I knew they needed to make a new one. It's like, here's the old one. And then at the very end, when we were feeling like the end fight with Rose and the matriarch needed this extra oomph, it was just like that morning, the night before, it was like, she's gonna pick up Trent's claw and it's gonna morph on, and it's the old, Frank and Eco power claw. And I remember pitching that to Lindsay, and she was like, yes, perfect, you did it. So that was a great feeling. And I was very happy that I brought it. And so I definitely will bring it, if to any Skyline production, I'm gonna fly in with those claws.
That is
just
awesome.
in case.
And do you know what? If you ever need funding for the fourth film, literally the market for movie props and costumes is unbelievable. It really is. Oh yeah, there's collectors out there. I mean, I collect film props, so I've got an original crystal from the Superman movie.
Wow.
That's all boxed, and I've got stuff from Serenity and Firefly and original scripts. So I collect scripts from films. So I've got like scripts from Superman and that was used by the cast and crew, and yeah, you'll be amazed honestly. So if you ever want to get rid of them, let me know. Please let me be the first person to give them a good home for the right price.
That's how I felt when I was watching them tear the sets down for 3, because I was just like, this spaceship, and they're just like, what are you gonna do with this? And it was just, it's just going. It's kind of like they put it kind of underneath the studio, and they reused bits of it, which is where we grabbed stuff, because Chernobyl had shot there before us, and so there's all these kind of broken up bits of like nuclear, reactor consoles and stuff. So we grabbed that and put it in our spaceship, and that's why it's like got a weird Soviet feel to everything.
Awesome.
So it's like, you got to reuse. It's indie filmmaking, so I'm sure like someone else is gonna then reuse our spaceship thing for something else. It's just it's the way it works. So that part's cool, but yeah, there is that like, what's going on with this? We basically put our suits, the wood coffins, and store them in between the movies, and then like we took them out of the coffin for 3, and we refurbished them and we redid everything, and they still worked again. So I don't know if that's gonna last for a part 4, but we'll probably try it.
You never know. And then looking back at when Skyline was released in 2010, was you quite reserved in releasing Skylines during the pandemic, or was it a case of you had to because of the deal you had with distribution, or would you have waited like James Bond has waited like 1.5 years and keep on changing it every month, the release
to
date?
be honest with you, I wish we had come out sooner, but the movie wasn't done. But like I felt like if we had come out any time from like August to October, we would have kind of been the only movie like that on the block. And unfortunately for us, it was like every movie that was supposed to come out in September, like a Monster Hunter, and I think Greenland was supposed to be November. Everybody just saved it for the big kind of Christmas, release, where there's so much money in VOD. But the market was really swamped. I mean, there was like something like 19 movies that came out the same weekend we did. So that was frustrating, because I felt like we were really unique, and we had a little bit more of like the spectacle that people were missing, frankly, for most of 2020. Like I kept looking at the release dates, and I was like, there hasn't been anything that's like kind of like this sci-fi monster space thing. The last thing that you could even think similar to it was Rise of Skywalker in Christmas 2019. So, but then Baisu would come out the month before. You had Monster Hunter, which and then you had like The Breach with Bruce Willis. And so I was a little bit like, I felt like the release date got a little too crowded. So but nothing like James Bond. Like we're primarily a VOD movie. We do like the week in theater release, but this movie really makes its money is in the VOD and then the Blu-ray and DVD corridor. then before going on to, streaming. So yeah, I again, it all was like, is the only way that it was going to work out. And that our original date was always the Christmas date because that's what Beyond's date was. But the difference being with Beyond is that like we came out the same day as The Last Jedi. And so everybody just like was steered away from that date.
You know what? You're not having any luck with dates, are you?
The fact, no, it was actually perfect because, we're getting the VOD people. They're like, oh, I wish I could go to see Star Wars, but it's sold out. So this is this new sci-fi on VOD. So it was a lot less crowded in the VOD market in 2017 than this pandemic one. I mean, then you even had like the week afterwards, Wonder Woman was free on HBO Max. It was just like a really, really swamped December. So yeah, but that was always the schedule and the plan that we were supposed to release on. So there wasn't any discussion about doing it any other way.
So I've got a few more questions before I let you get on with the rest of your day, because I know you're a very busy man. So these are quite bizarre questions, but I want to ask you them. Do you believe in aliens? Do you actually believe in aliens?
I do. But I'm very, very skeptical about any Earth, any of that type of stuff. So my wife always makes fun of me because she believes and like it very much believes the conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
I just seem to be of the fact that like if they exist and like someone told like Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, like I just don't think we wouldn't know by now, and it wouldn't be a bigger thing. I just feel like there's too much stupidity and incompetence at the top levels of our governments that
they're staying away.
That I'm just like, I don't know. That part of it feels like it's also like they're kind of saying now they're just releasing this stuff. They're saying, yeah, this is a UFO. That's a UFO. They are definitely getting a little bit more out with it, but I just remain skeptical until the end as far as anything that's actually happened, but absolutely believe that they exist and that that the universe is just far too vast and infinite to have only us on this small little blue planet. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I'm just kind of like on both sides. It's like absolutely believe, very skeptical.
You see, my wife believes in aliens because she says octopuses are aliens because apparently they've got alien DNA.
Yes, no, exactly.
I think it's hilarious.
It's funny. I had a project that was like that. It was like Alien Arc, and it was about kind of, cryptozoologists and the fact that like, yes, there already is alien DNA on Earth. So again, yeah, I completely agree with that as well. I mean, we are kind of aliens ourselves. It makes perfect sense. Like, what do we really have in common with the rest of the nature on this planet? We obviously are always trying to like create a different environment than the one that's been given to us.
Definitely. And the next question, do you feel being a director makes you a better parent?
I think it's more the inverse of being a parent makes you a better director. Right. I think there's a lot of mouths to feed on a set, and there's a lot of different types of people that require different approaches, and if you've dealt with a cranky toddler, and then now I'm getting, my oldest is 11, so I'm getting into the like teenagers with attitude. I think all that experience and realizing that there's not a one size fits all solution for people, and that it's a lot of meeting people's needs and providing them with secure. And so I think being a parent is great experience for being a good director and a good collaborator in general. I'm not sure if being a director makes you a good parent, because it takes so much damn time away from actually doing your job as a parent. So I would say it's the opposite. It's the inverse.
Okay. And you've named one of your litter, Trent. Is that after the character?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good man. Oh,
Yeah.
I like to hear that.
My oldest Ronan is in the first movie. He's this little baby on the plane at the beginning of Skyline. My second, Ruby, plays young Rose in one tiny little shot at the end of Beyond. It was another one of those pickups that we needed to make a transition into
Yeah.
Lindsay's reveal. Pearl has not made any appearance in it, but I do feel like Pearl is a lot like Rose. Both Ruby and Pearl were a lot of the, not only just inspiration, but also like who I wanted to make the movie for. And they both really loved part 3, and they're too young to watch an R-rated movie, but I showed it to them anyway. And they really loved Rose, and they really loved Trent, especially the fact that, oh my God, this alien's named after our brother. I'm like, actually, he's named after the alien. So they love that aspect of it as well. And yeah, let's see how Trent feels about it once he's able to speak in a few years. But yeah, he's 6 months.
You see, I've got 2 daughters, 7 and 3, and my oldest is called Lois after Lois Lane, and my younger one's Cara after Supergirl. So
we just watched Superman and Lois last night as a family, and
I haven't watched
it.
I haven't watched it because it's not in the UK. It's not in the UK, and I'm absolutely gutted. So I've got to wait. And I met Tyler and Bitsy a while back, and I'm dying to watch it. I really am. Was it good?
They spent some money on that pilot. Yeah, like the VFX I thought looked really good. I had never seen him as Superman before, and so, but he looked like really good, really big, and it felt like they got the character. It was, and it's a nice approach to see him with teenage sons. It was just something different that we haven't gone through before. But yeah, the whole family really enjoyed it. It's going to be the new family show. So
excellent, good to hear. And in person, he's quite a small guy. In person, he's quite short.
There's a little bit of that, but they feel like when he's in the suit, they kind of film him differently. He just looked bigger than he did on some of the Supergirl stuff that I had seen.
Yeah, so fingers crossed it will come over to the UK soon. So because it's annoying. It's when you see spoilers on the internet, because the internet is such a good thing, then can be a bad thing at the same time. I think spoilers are just awful. And as Brits, we get forgotten about all the time. We really do. But it's great that everyone can see Skylines, which is out on DVD and Blu-ray. And is coming to Netflix on the 18th of March, if I'm right in saying
that.
One last thing. On IMDb, I always look at the trivia part of whoever I'm interviewing. And it makes me laugh when there's only like 1 or 2 things. So we need to sort that out, Liam, and we need to come up with some great trivia about you. Because currently on your IMDb, it just says nephew of Lawrence. So
that's right.
You're a soccer dad or coach, should I say?
Yes.
Which I think is very brave of you, because I've been to soccer games in the US, like school soccer games, because I've got relatives in the States. And it's the scariest environment to be in, especially with all the mums sat at the edge of the pitch in their chairs with their books. And if it's slightly raining, they bring like a PVC sort of hut that they can sit in.
The four up.
Yeah, so I think that should be on your IMDb. You used to play American football, which I did myself in the UK. I was a defensive tackle, so absolutely loved it. And I've been to see a lot of football games in the States, in Baltimore and Washington, and Philadelphia Eagles as well, but mainly on the East Coast, not the West Coast. But yeah, so
that's awesome.
We need to get that on there for you. You need to, whoever you need to speak to, have some more things on there.
Oh no, I think when I was like first starting out, I would add my own trivia up there, and it was like all this little stuff, and then I think I was like, I think I could take that off now. it was a big deal just to get the IMDb, credit when starting out. It was like, I'm a real boy. So yeah, maybe I could update that. I like that.
soccer dad / coach. But
the other coaches would be like, "You're not a real coach." I'm like, "Yeah, I basically like run and get the balls." Like, I the only thing I feel like I'm pretty good at, and maybe this is the directing thing, is that like there's all these coaches that have all the fundamentals down for lineups. I don't know why it's hard for them to realize that like you need a playmaker on the two different levels of you can't put like they'll put their two best players like on defense next to each other. And I'm like, who's he going to pass to? How's it going to get up the field? Like all the kids at the front of the field.
You're being the director at the football game.
The ball, we're just launching the ball down the field, and then they're coming back at us the whole goddamn half. What are you doing? So yeah, to me, it's just like it's all about the lineups. The rest of it, you can't really do much as a coach in soccer.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, the games that I've been to, because we're British, we scream and yell and we're quite vocal, and all these Americans are looking at us going, "Oh dear."
Yes.
Who are they? Yeah. And we're like, come on, take him down.
You can always tell which dads like know what they're doing and they're screaming. But like, yeah, they'll get like a quiet talking to from the AYSO like reps that they'll take you aside if you're too loud. I remember getting really upset about an offside call. We were down by like 5 goals, and it's like, dude, can you just give us the goddamn goal so the kids don't cry at halftime? They're 7 years old, and it's like, no, offsides.
Oh, give him a break. You know what I mean? He's 7. It's not like Premier League,
Right. But it was a close call. It was a 50-50 call.
I don't know. But Liam, thank you so much for giving me your time. I've had a blast chatting with you, and I've got to say, everything that you do is fantastic. The films that you direct, write, and produce are just outstanding, and it's a pity there's not more films like that out there. So you must be doing something incredible, not only from the visual side of things, but the story as well. And I look forward to the 4th one in the installment coming. But thank you so much. Yeah, fingers crossed. And so the 18th of March, Netflix. It's available now on Blu-ray and DVD. Stop messing about. Buy the film. Support the franchise, and we'll get the 4th one very, very soon. Liam, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. It was a blast. Anytime. Happy to be here.